This right here is the slam dunk that we've needed for some time, so Split Fiction recently released and I've been completely taken away by it. This game is just one big love letter to gaming as a whole, taking inspiration and ideas from some of the best titles out there and putting its own spin on it. I kinda hate it when discourse separates Japan and the West when it comes to their contributions to gaming, but we can all agree that Split Fiction is that 10 out of 10 that the Western side has needed for some time. Especially after last year with all these studio closures and baffling decisions being made by corporate higher-ups to make more money. Like seriously, the way Xbox treated Tango Games after making Hi-Fi Rush should have been a crime. But anyway, enough about all that negativity, let's talk about Split Fiction and why it's so amazing. So the general concept of Split Fiction is actually very simple. It's a co-op adventure where you basically go between this sci-fi and fantasy land, and it can be anything really. And I genuinely mean anything when I say this. The entire genre of the game can just change on a dime, and it's insane how much effort they put into these smaller sections. Every time the gameplay would switch things up, I'd just be thinking to myself, damn, this could be its own standalone release. Some of these ideas are so well fleshed out. Like seriously, Split Fiction genuinely spoils the player with how it does this. So many different ideas and unique concepts come around so quickly, and it's just like, I can't even compare it to any other game when it comes to this aspect. I know they had It Takes Two and that did win Game of the Year when it came out, but seriously, this is a huge step up from that game, and that's saying something since It Takes Two was a really great experience, but it just feels like here, so many of those ideas are just better realised and it switches things up so quickly. The developers Hazelight who made this game are genuine standouts and are incredible examples of just how amazing you can make gaming. I've made no secret with this channel that I'm kind of cynical when it comes to the state of online gaming, since a lot of it is just designed to be competitive and to make people kind of hate one another, and live service nonsense to keep bringing you back with predatory actions. You've all heard this a million times. But even taking Split Fiction and comparing it to more online centered games, it absolutely succeeds on this front. Like even as a bonding experience, like most people play online games because they want to be with someone else, well Split Fiction really just succeeds in that aspect. I really felt like I got to know the other person I was playing with, and we was constantly cracking jokes, killing one another. It's designed around just having a really nice time. I feel like this title is going to be amazing if you ever want to introduce someone into gaming and they haven't really took the dive yet, since so much of it is just designed to feel good and it's so polished and it's going to keep someone else's attention span without them feeling overwhelmed. Like this is a really good casual sort of experience. I will be honest though, this game was surprisingly difficult at times. Going into it, I was not expecting to die as many times that I did. Like I was not expecting this game to be as hard as it actually is, but there's so much polish when it comes to dying. Like you constantly respawning, and when you do lose progress, it's literally like 10 seconds apart from one another. So in that aspect, yeah, the game is pretty difficult, but I still feel like it's casual friendly because by the time you're dead and you've reset your progress, you're back at the same point. You're not really going to lose anything or feel any frustration. Anyway, moving on to the main gameplay of Split Fiction, it's primarily a platformer. You'll be jumping off of different objects, parkouring, and making a path for the other player. Throughout each level there'll be these hidden side content sections. This is where you'll see drastic changes to the art style and game mechanics of Split Fiction. They act as a palette cleanser of sorts and really complements the pacing of the main game. You can tell that during development, similar to something like Breath of the Wild, the developers probably had to cut a lot of ideas during planning. But these literal side content areas are a genius in universe way to have the designers allow themselves to make anything that they want. And what's great too is that they never overstay their welcome, allowing for a decent bit of gameplay variety without shaking things up too much and bringing you back to the main gameplay loop. I will say though, it might be a little too modest and it kinda undersells them calling it side content. Like compared to any other game, side content is typically just boring filler, but here it's so substantial and well fleshed out that it feels like these ideas could be their own releases. Also, during your exploration there'll be plenty of boss fights sprinkled throughout. I was really taken back at just how many bosses are in this title, especially compared to It Takes Two. I know it might be sounding like I'm repeating the same points here, but I really don't have any big negatives to say on this game outside of some small points that I'll bring up later on, but yeah, the boss fights in this game are amazing. Like the core of Split Fiction, the boss fights are very much based on you working together with your teammates and cooperating to take them down. There's also more mobility options this time around when compared to previous games. For instance, you have a roll that really comes in handy when trying to dodge the barrages of attacks that you'll be dealing with in these boss fights. But similar to previous points, the boss fights in Split Fiction lends itself well to how the gameplay keeps shaking things up. For instance, you'll be fighting them 2D sometimes, 3D, top down, it can really be anything. Now, I need to mention my favourite part of Split Fiction, what I would say is the absolute peak of the experience, and it's one of my favourite memories in any game that I've ever played. So at some point later on in the game, you'll be controlling this ball. Each character's ball has these different abilities they can use to navigate the map. Now at some point you have to hack into this door, and what follows is one of the most creative sequences I've ever seen in the game. It starts off as pinball, but what's really incredible is that one player controls the paddle whilst the other controls the ball, and what follows is just this amazing platforming section that has its own boss to top things off. Like, how many games can you actually say has a pinball boss fight? That is something so out there and creative. It's just incredible. It really blew me away and made me realise just how amazing Split Fiction is. I'm sure everyone who plays this game will probably have their own favourite sequence, since there's so many moments and different aspects that people will probably lean towards differently. But if anyone ever asks me my favourite moment of this game, it's going to be the pinball section. Like, seriously, navigating this crazy moment and trying to talk with your teammate, and then the boss fight comes out of nowhere, it's the stuff of creativity. It really reminded me of like Psychonauts, just that raw craziness of just adding things together and making weird ideas come to life. It really is what gaming should be. Moving on to the more smaller aspects of Split Fiction, let's talk about the performance and graphics of this game. First off, Split Fiction isn't compatible with cross-generational systems like the PlayStation 4 and really takes advantage of the hardware provided with the PlayStation 5 and modern systems. It Takes Two still looks pretty good today even though it ran on the Nintendo Switch and PlayStation 4, but Split Fiction is a huge step up in every way. Loading is practically non-existent, and some of the skyboxes with the sci-fi worlds in particular are just jaw-dropping, they look incredible. The powerhouse of modern machines also lend themselves really well to the stylized visuals of this game and how the art style constantly changes between worlds. Similar to the Game of the Year winner last year, Astrobot, it's proved that you shouldn't always chase realistic visuals, and a good stylized art style can really push a game visually. A small visual detail that I also really appreciated is just how the protagonist designs constantly change throughout the journey. Even when returning to the sci-fi and fantasy worlds, they get different outfits, which is a really neat design detail. One last point on the performance of this game, I didn't witness any frame rate dips during gameplay, everything ran at a very smooth 60 frames per second. It's really crazy once you realise the rollback on this game. It got announced in December, came out in March and was practically perfect at launch with no issues at all. Like I said before, I don't like singling out the Western gaming sphere, but we can at least admit that this is very unprecedented. Granted, it couldn't escape from the large file size, 90GB for this game is quite a bit if you ask me. But nitpicks aside, I have some tiny complaints for this game that are practically non-existent. Gameplay wise it's polished, but I just want to talk a little bit on its story. Story wise, things are very light-hearted and easygoing. The protagonists, Sophie and Mio, start off very cold towards one another but eventually warm up throughout the course of the journey. It's a theme that all these co-op games kind of share. They start off having the characters kind of hate one another but eventually like each other by the end of the journey. I think my only real complaint is that I kind of wish certain plot points were sort of fleshed out more, especially when it comes to like Mio's dad for example. I won't say too much because I want to keep things very light on the story. But given the fast-paced nature of this game, it only makes sense that certain plot points were only given so much time. I will say though, some of the overarching themes that this game has, I was a huge fan of. For instance, the whole aspect of how stories has a piece of the author itself, that's a really good thing to explore in this game. Another theme that this game tackles that I think it's going to age really well as a result of is how it kind of goes into the whole AI uprising and how ideas are being stolen without permission nowadays. It's a really scary reality and I'm sure it shook a lot of people with the realization of just how big AI is becoming. Overall, as someone who's played It Takes Two on A Way Out, I was pretty surprised by the story and just how good it is in Split Fiction. I wasn't really expecting it to touch on certain subject matters. My one last complaint for Split Fiction, and it has nothing to do with the game itself, it has all to do with the actual publishers. After last year with how Xbox treated Tango Games with Hi-Fi Rush, I've been very shaken at just the prospects of how certain games that do really well can be treated after they've released. EA really needs no introduction when it comes to their past as a publisher. A recent example of just how obnoxious they can be is how they pulled the plug on the Dead Space remake project. I hate fearmongering, but hear me out for a second. Despite the success of Split Fiction both critically and commercially, EA is known for having some pretty high sales expectations and they'll pull the plug for any excuse that they can think of. The Dead Space remake sold really well and had an incredible critical reception back when it came out. And even though it would have made so much sense to make a remake of Dead Space 2, they just decided to can the whole project. I'm pretty negative when it comes to the Western gaming sphere, and Split Fiction really was that wake up call that I needed. But despite how amazing it is, I'm still concerned at the future of this release. Especially when we live in a space where good games don't get the recognition that they deserve. And even when they do get that recognition and love that they deserve, the publishers can pull the plug at any moment. Despite my concerns for the future of this title regarding the right now, Split Fiction is an absolute masterpiece. The developers, Hazelight Studios, deserve all the praise that they can get and are hands down up there with giants like Valve and Nintendo when it comes to level design filled with unique and interesting ideas, but above all know how to make games fun. In this modern age of reality where things are looking grim for a lot of people, we need more pure fun that's free from discourse and hate now more than ever. Split Fiction offers this in spades and allows you to experience all of this with another person, getting to know one another better. Also, this is hands down the best game I played so far this year out of all the releases from 2025. No doubt this will get nominated for a Game of the Year award. Split Fiction is worth every penny and I'm very glad that I played this title. I highly recommend Split Fiction if you was wondering whether or not it's worth it. You can't put a time limit on this kind of quality. Anyway, have you played Split Fiction? What do you think of the game so far? Let me know in the comment section. Also, any feedback on this video would be appreciated. Thank you so much for watching and I hope you have a nice rest of your day.